Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's presentation, The Things You Should Know About Project Consultate, presented by the FEI Dallas chapter. I'm waiting for a bunch of folks to come in from the waiting room, and we appreciate your patience. Before we get started, I'm going to do a CPE announcement and let you know that this program is worth 1.5 CPE credits, and to be eligible for that, you do need to have answer at least 5 of the 6 polling questions presented during the webinar and be present during 75 minutes of the presentation. CPE credit is granted based on a 50-minute hour, and we are unable to grant credit to those who are not verified by the technology. However, please answer in the chat box if you miss a poll, or let me know that you've missed a poll, and we'll be sure that you get the CPE credit. Before we go any further, I'm going to launch my first poll and allow you to answer whether you would like to receive CPE credit for today's presentation. So for those of you who would like it, or only if you, there you go, that's funny.
Hey, we got some takers there.
I do, I see that, you know, and me being in the CPE business, I'm looking forward to this. Maybe I can make some money out of this.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the end of that poll, folks, and we appreciate your time. I'll keep track of the folks taking polls. We have about 25 of you now, so we appreciate your time. And now I'd like to introduce, I don't see him here, so we'll go right on forward to Cliff Edwards, introduce Cliff Edwards, who is the president of Thomas Edwards Group and also the Dallas Chapter Career Management co-chair. Welcome, Cliff.
Thank you. Thank you. I could have done my fake Bob Walker. What's the matter with this thing? Okay. He doesn't do that. But, you know, since he's not here, don't give away FANG leads and join the FEI. So actually, Bob does talk a lot about the FEI, and I think it's a great organization. For those in the audience that are not in it, it's a good way to meet peers, be in special interest groups, and then you can get all your CPE also. So it's a great place to network. Really the top chapter in the country in the top CFO networking group in North Texas as well. So if you have any questions, Jay is on the board, I'm on the board. Please feel free to call us or email or contact John Casey as well. So, well, thank you all for joining today. We have a really interesting and timely presentation today. We have Jay Smith and Ben Pinto talking, and they've talked in the past about working on projects as a career, as a bridge, you know, to your next job, and as a lifestyle as well. So I think you're really going to like what they have to say today, and I'm guessing a number of people in the audience have done this before. So let me tell you a little bit about our speakers. We have Jay Smith. Jay Smith is a director for Jefferson Wells. They manage finance and accounting projects, including M&A, financial modeling projects, technical accounting issues and projects, SEC matters, and process improvements. It'll be a nice contrast because they're a big national company, and Jay's been with a couple of those, and I think it'll be very interesting to contrast the type of opportunities that he sees on a regular basis and the ones that Ben does. Now, Jay is on the executive board of FEI. He teaches college-level Excel modeling classes. That's impressive. He has a bachelor's degree from Tulane, an MBA from the Darden School at the University of Virginia, and he just recently, in the last year, I think, completed studies in business and data analytics at Harvard. So there's a rumor about Jay that he's a pretty smart guy. And then we have Harvard on the Plains, Ben Pinto. So Ben went to Texas A&M University, got his CPA, started his career out at EY, and has maintained a CPA status all these years. He is a partner and director with the single office leading international staffing and direct hire firm, Thomas Edwards Group. You know, we have insurance policies that don't let us get in the same room at the same time, but I guess with Zoom we're safe. Absolutely not true. Ben has 20 years of combined accounting and finance experience. Prior to Thomas Edwards Group, he worked for a large regional firm in business development and also in direct hire search. So I think he brings kind of a nice contrast of what the companies are looking for, what a candidate's looking for on a full-time basis versus a project basis. Like I said, he began his career at EY. He, let's see, has really worked on projects, I think, as large as probably 50 to 75 plus people to small companies that needed an interim controller. So I think both Jay and Ben will be able to offer just a really good perspective on the pluses and the minuses of doing project and consulting work, and then how to work with a vendor if there is one, how to work with the client, and how to best put yourself out there. So without further ado, Jay and Ben, thank you so much.
Thank you, Cliff. Appreciate that. Yeah, it's a real pleasure to get to work. That's that polling question. Let's jump into this. You know, it was really, I want to thank, you know, Emily and Nancy, you know, Cliff, Bob, the folks, FEI, FANG. Just, it's a great opportunity to kind of talk through this great topic. I mean, you know, it was in 1998, I found myself in a job search situation, maybe similar to some of you. And although I had worked with recruiters in a permanent search, you know, I was really totally unaware at the time of the opportunities to work project or a contract, anything like that. And so I thought, well, hey, maybe this is this would be a good, interesting topic to talk with folks. Maybe some of you, I think nowadays more people are aware of these opportunities, but they may not know of all the specific ins and outs, inner workings of how to work with firms. You know, the differences between project consulting, interim services, and the various things. So I thought, you know, this would be an opportunity. We really, it's a privilege to get to. I've known Jay for a long time, and it's a privilege to get to present with him. We've never done that before, but he brings a great perspective as well. And so what we did is we kind of put this together really in three parts, as you can kind of see from the agenda. It's really trying to make sure we kind of communicate what the differences between project consulting and interim services. A lot of times people will use those interchangeably, and, you know, versus contract to hire as well. But then also kind of cover the concerns and the benefits of that. And then, and as well as locating and pricing that type of work. And then it goes into working with the companies and kind of what the companies are targeting in the ways of skills for the various types of work, and then how to actually work with them and putting yourself into the best position for those opportunities. And then kind of the third part is really more of just a general market update and questions around what you know, general questions that we'd have. But with that, I would really encourage, and I think Jay and I both would love to encourage questions as we're going through the presentation. If you have some specific questions or around a specific topic, you know, please ask question through the chat. Nancy or Emily will be kind of checking in on those, and they have gotten full reins to just interrupt and ask those questions. Cliff, I know you'll hear something that might need to be elaborated on. I certainly would appreciate that as well. We want to make sure there's some clarity around this type of work, and make sure we leave some room for general questions as well at the end. So with that, let's go ahead. And I really want to kind of start off with a polling question, actually, because I think it would be helpful to kind of get a sense for where people are in regards to consulting. So if you would, you know, take some time to answer that question. Interesting. Oh, it's kind of all over the board. Some people still making their time. I know I'm curious to see what these results are. Okay, I think it looks like everybody's kind of it's really split right down the, is everybody able to see those results?
Yes, they can see the results now, Ben.
Okay, good. That's interesting that it's almost, you know, split a third across the board. Any surprises there, Jay?
No, I think the one thing to note here is that we've seen this a lot of times this goes in waves depending on what the job outlook is like. And I think over the last, I'd say 12 to 15 years, I've seen more and more people actually transitioning to a full-time career option because it does provide, some benefits. So no big surprises for me.
Yeah, yeah, likewise. I think that's what we'll kind of talk about some of that as we go. But let's jump into, Jay, if you would, kind of talk a little bit about the differences between the various types of work here.
Sure. Thank you, Ben. And first, I want to thank everyone that has helped put this together and all of our attendees today. I'm thrilled and honored to be speaking here today. So let's dive into really the difference in terminology here when we're talking about project consulting versus interim work versus contract to hire. So let's jump into the two first ones, project consulting versus interim work. When I look at project consulting, the way that I define that is typically there is a need at a client that requires a specialized skill set. A lot of companies may not want to bring that specialized skill set on on a permanent basis because it's a one-time need. So typically that's going to entail a set start date, a set end date of a project, perhaps a set deliverable and a set budget. Okay. So, and a lot of times you might be working either with the client or B, someone from the interim or consulting firm in order to oversee that project and get the client what they want. Now, opposed to interim work where, that really is the idea that, hey, there's a company that has a need, and it may be to play catch up for year end or for account reconciliations or to get over a hump where really we need some smart arms and legs in there. Typically, individuals that work on those interim type of projects would normally report to a stakeholder at the company for their day-to-day business operations and tasks. They might still have a periodic check-in, of course, with the consulting firm, but are getting their direction from the company that they were hired to help. Now then, let's talk about contract to hire, right? Either of these positions could turn into a full-time hire, potential. When I hear contract to hire, right, I want to try before I buy. And that is both, and this is important to note, this is both for the client as well as the consultant. I think a lot of times that people view the contract to hire scenario as being an opportunity for the client to decide if they want to hire somebody. And yes, that is part of it, but the benefits of contract to hire, it also allows the consultant or the project professional, if we will, to get in there, meet the team, really see what's under the hood of that company, and really figure out if that is a place that they want to work at for, an extended period of time. I will tell you that when I talk to clients who bring up the aspect of contract to hire, I do let them know that a lot of times when you're looking at a contract to hire, you may be fishing from a different pond than you might be from the other one, especially as it pertains to polling question number 2. If you wanted to do this, if you wanted to do a career consulting job, you probably are not used, or you probably don't have the desire to do a contract to hire if there's going to be pressure to go on full time. So I do warn clients that say, listen, your pool gets a little lower when you start doing that contract to hire. Why don't we start off with interim work? And if there's a need that you want to bring that person in full time, let's go ahead and talk about it at that time, as opposed to putting it out there in the front. So any questions on project consulting versus interim work versus contract to hire at this point? I don't see any, but I think that gives us a pretty good overview. Ben, what else would you add to that?
Yeah, Jay, I was going to ask, have you, when you think of project consulting, how often are they fixed fee type of projects?
I think that's firm by firm. I really do. Most of the projects that I see are more of a time and material, or sometimes it may be a not to exceed type of amount. But we typically do our project consulting on time and material. So meaning then that we would pay the project professional on an hourly basis.
Yeah, I think that's sometimes one of the surprises for some folks. I think some people think, oh, consulting, there's probably maybe more fixed fee type arrangements. But yeah, you're right. More often than not, it's time and materials. But I do kind of think about project consulting. Generally, there's some subject matter expertise that the client is looking for. There's some specific methodologies and thought leadership that they are employing there. Whereas on the interim, I feel like they're still looking for talent and skill and experience, but it's generally an open position or due to maybe maternity leave, medical leave, something like that, or it could also just be a peak season or difficulty in hiring and finding permanent talent. And so, and you're right. I think you mentioned that we see contract, clients hiring folks that are placed on a pure contract basis just as much as we see them going into a contract to hire situation. So sometimes the term contract to hire is it is limiting. It is a different pool that you're fishing in. I like your analogy there because it is more challenging because you're having to limit yourself to maybe it's a salary range or number of years of experience or something like that versus getting somebody that has the skills, the experience that can do the job. And then they realize, hey, this is a great fit, and it turns into contract hire. We've seen a lot of that.
Hey, Ben?
Yes.
Yeah, Ben and Jay, we've got a couple of quick questions.
Okay.
This one from Richard. I have an opportunity to join a startup hotel company full-time as a CFO. They have literally every transaction cycle is in serious need of process documentation, procedures, automation. Definitely they are behind the 8 ball, so to speak. How do I go about engaging credible project consultants? Are there specific companies who can guide you in the selection process of support contractors and consultants? You know, so it sounds like he's close to accepting an opportunity, and they've got some things that need documenting.
Ben?
Well, I mean let me send you my contact information, right?
Hey, Ben, you want to do rock, paper, scissors?
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. I think you ought to talk to 2 firms. Yeah, I mean, you know, I think this is the kind of thing that we talk about just with one of the benefits of FEI and FEI is hopefully you've established some context with folks that we'll kind of mention this a little bit later in the presentation, but just working with people that you know and you trust and that have been in the business for a long period of time. I think that's key, because if they've been in the business for a long period of time, chances are they're going to be in the business for a long period of time going forward, and so they can be a long-term partner.
And Ben, let me just add in, you know, when I gave you an example, or I gave you kind of my definitions of what project consulting versus interim work, just to give you an idea maybe of what might fall in the bucket of project consulting. You might have some PM work for an ERP implementation. You might have an SEC project. You might have a due diligence or evaluation support. A lot of the Sarbanes-Oxley might fall under project consulting, especially as it comes to risk assessments. And I differentiate that from interim work, where I need, say, an interim senior accountant or an interim assistant controller. And, you know, we just need to get this individual in and just start punching off items off the punch list from now until whenever that list is done. So I hope that clarifies it just a little bit more.
Well, and I might interject too. You know, there are a number of places, and each one has a different model. You can go from, you know, a Grant Thornton consulting unit to more of a temporary staffing type approach. You know, RGP, Resources Global Professionals, is a good firm. Jefferson Wells is, you know, very well established, a lot of offices. Harris and Dickey, Robert Half, Management Resources. River Run, probably more on the consulting side, but they have a team of really good people. So a lot of it kind of depends on what project responsibility you want them to take and whether they may have some expertise in-house as well. We do projects like that. Ours tends to be more from a staffing or staffing augmentation perspective.
Right, Cliff. I think, a lot depends on if you have the expertise, if you kind of have an idea and a plan of how you want to execute it, and you really just need resources to support that, skilled resources, then that can, determine your approach, versus if you really kind of want to, if you don't have a plan and a process or methodology, then, maybe looking at one of the other firms that provides that. Hopefully that answers the question.
And while we're at it, one more quick question from Fernando Lopez. Is the rate pretty much the same? And I think this is for the consultant, right? The pay rate. Is the pay rate pretty much the same across the board, regardless of the type of service, whether it's consulting, interim, or contract?
Hey, Ben, do you mind if I jump in real quick?
Go for it.
Yeah, and I think we're going to be touching on this later on, but at the end of the day, we typically, as a group, and I'm talking kind of all of us that we, whether it's JW, Jefferson Wells, or Thomas Edwards, or Harrison Dickey, we tend to price projects based on the skill set needed. Okay, so the rate can be the same, assuming the work is the same. But if you are an individual that is brought in to do a complex SEC project and taking a company through bankruptcy, that might warrant a larger price than if you were to come in and be an assistant controller, keeping the wheels on while somebody is out on maternity leave or something like that. Ben?
Yeah, right. No, you're right. And we will kind of talk a little bit. I always kind of say the term I always use, the role dictates the pay a little bit. But that's exactly right. All right. Well, let's keep moving. So let's talk a little bit about the concerns of project consulting and interim work. I mean, obviously the impact on a permanent job search. I think a lot of folks are in a permanent job search, and I think that's a fair concern. I mean, you think about, I always kind of talk with candidates that as I'm meeting with them is, looking at how long has it been since they've been in a job search. I've met with some candidates. I mean, here recently we've had some fairly large companies that have done some downsizing, and so they had a lot of very tenured people that may have been 20 years at one organization, and they haven't really had to network and do that sort of thing. So I generally am a little shy of folks jumping into a project or interim work if they haven't been in a job search, because I do think it's going to impact that. If you're taking off early on a project to interview and those kinds of things, I mean, it's not going to reflect well. It's probably not going to really reflect who you are as an employee, as a worker. You're probably more likely to really dig in and want to do a great job and not taking time off. But hey, that permanent search is a big priority. So make it a big priority if that's the case, and make the decision to not necessarily to jump into contract work. And so I think that is a rightly to be a concern. And also from that, there's a little bit of a resume impact, right, as well. It's if I do a lot of contract work, how's that going to impact my resume? And so we'll kind of talk about that. I think there's some ways to present it, but I mean, rightly so, that is a concern. The downtime, right? I mean, let's face it. I mean, there is the likelihood of having some downtime if you're doing some project consulting or interim work for any period of time. And certainly as a career, needless to say, you will experience a little bit of downtime, and no one knows exactly how long that is, and that creates some anxiety. Right? I mean, Jay, you've worked in more bench salaried models, and they don't escape it either. If we're not in a time like that right now, I think everybody's pretty much off the bench these days. But there's been times where if you're sitting on the bench and there's no work out there, you're trying to make yourself kind of hidden.
Right.
And so that, rightly so, that I guess is a concern. But there's always work, coming along. The uncertain ending of an assignment, right? That is a fair concern as well. you know, we try as a firm, we're checking in with candidates, we're checking in with clients. We're always trying to manage and understand when projects or interim work is an assignment's going to end. But the reality is it can end at any time. I mean, budgets get cut, people come back. You know, there's all kinds of things, right? So there is some uncertainty as to when a project's going to end. We always ask for 2 weeks notice from our candidates. We always like to ask the same for our clients, but we realize that we don't always get that. Dealing with multiple firms, this can be kind of interesting. You know, when you're in a job search and potentially working projects, you might be getting calls about lots of opportunities, and I think it's really critical that as a candidate you really manage your job search and make sure you know where your resume, where you're being presented for projects, and sometimes some companies will try to pull you off of one project to another. I'm generally one that discourages leaving one project for another project. I mean, if it's a permanent position, that certainly makes sense, but the nature of project and interim work can be uncertain. And so just, you know, be leery of firms that might be trying to get you to leave one project for another if you're doing that type of work. We'll talk about working with firms later, and that kind of covers a little bit of that as well. And then matching skills to the project needs. I think what I mean by this is, I think there's situations where there's a little bit of anxiety when you are being thrown into a project or an assignment that is probably messy. There's a reason that they need you. And the learning curve is much steeper, shorter. I mean, they kind of expect somebody to ramp up fairly quickly. And it's one of the reasons we always like to work with really experienced people, because they tend to not get frazzled, and they tend to know how to figure things out. They've been around long enough, they can see things, they can adapt and recognize similarities between some of their projects. But I think rightly so, that is a concern for people that may not have the stomach for that type of expectation. Jay, would you add any concerns on that?
I think when we get to matching skills to the project needs, I think the other caveat I would throw in there is, if you have not been working for a while and you're hungry to get back out there in the workplace, sometimes people will sign up for something that they may not be as comfortable with. And you know, what we try to do is we try to match those skills to the project needs, but don't try to oversell yourself into a project just to get into a project, because that does not do anybody any good in the long run. It doesn't do the client any good. It doesn't do you any good in terms of just your comfortability with that assignment. And a lot of times people end up back at square one. So I would just say that it is important to know what you're capable of doing, and really trying to, if it means waiting just a little bit longer for that right opportunity that comes, I think it is worth the time.
Great. Well, with that, let's jump into a polling question, because I'm kind of curious what other folks' concerns are. So I know, I think when I was out there in the market, so I can kind of empathize a little bit. I mean, I was concerned about benefits and compensation, just because at the time I was in that situation. I was the primary breadwinner, and that was a big concern. Now, different stage of life, a little bit different concerns. I mean, I kind of, that kind of has gone away a little bit. And that seems to be, maybe I'm more normal than I thought. Looks like. All right, there you go. Look at those. How about that? Who'd have thunk it? I am normal. Maybe a little. Great. So yeah, what is that? 44%. It's benefits and compensation. I like the fact we got a lot of folks with no concerns at all. I think there's probably a fair bit of folks that have done it long enough, and they know that that those opportunities come in, and they probably know how to make some of their own rain, I would imagine, as well. That's great. Well, let's talk a little bit about, whoops, let's talk about um, the benefits of project consulting and interim work. Well, obviously there's the cash flow that provides. It's nice to have a paycheck, right? And I think that's a big part of it. Again, kind of going back, if someone has, yeah, you know, because it does impact your permanent search. But if you don't have a nice severance, or you can't weather that as much, well then, hey, the cash flow is critical. I think that's um, an obvious benefit. But I think another one is fresh and new experience and learning. I mean, Jay talked about not overselling yourself for projects, and you certainly don't want to do that. But at the same time, sometimes clients are a little more flexible in terms of their need when it comes to getting somebody, especially on an interim side. I mean, hey, they've just had somebody leave unexpectedly. They're looking to get somebody in quickly. They may not be able to. They fully expect to do a permanent search, but they need somebody in there tomorrow. And how are they going to get someone in if they're going to be limiting themselves to all their requirements? So they can be a little bit more flexible. So it might be the opportunity to get a new industry or a new software that may not be as critical in the essence of time. So you might be hitting the market just at the right time to be able to get into that. I also think confidence is a big part. I mean, I've just seen that in people's demeanor when they're working and they're getting. I mean, some folks really may enjoy a job search, but for folks that are actually in the job search, I mean, it can also be a beating at times. And although right now I would say coming in second in a job search is probably really a good situation, because a lot of clients are having to turn to their second, third choices because candidates are getting counters and getting multiple offers. But I do think it can really wear on your confidence as a candidate. Getting into a contract or a project can really boost that confidence.
Hey, Ben, I might also say is that alongside with the confidence is now you're doing something, you're using your skills. A job search can be a little bit demoralizing. Now you're using those skills, you're going to work pretty much every day or a number of hours per week. It gives you something to compare that first job offer or that next job offer to you. Also provides the like cash flow, like it says above. And so, you know, it's less likely that you're going to take a position that really isn't a good fit for you. Whereas if you've been looking a few months or more and you get that first job offer, you may feel pressured to take it. So I think plus it makes you interview better. So you're using skills, you've got something to compare it to, you have some leverage, and you have a little bit more bargaining power as well.
Agreed. Absolutely. You're right. That's true. So, and then, the flexibility, picking and choosing assignments. For those that have done this as a career, they really like that. They get to pick and choose the projects. Is it interesting? Is it something I enjoy doing? Is it, is it close to home? I mean, all those kinds of things. Or does it, nowadays, hey, does it offer some work remote opportunities? So I think, there's opportunities like that. I had a candidate that had a place in Martha's Vineyard, must be nice, but they like to take the summers off and be able to go there. Or another one that had grandkids up Northeast, that was nice to be able to go and take off and do some things like that. And you can easily do that between projects. Work-life balance. I mean, we certainly, and I'm sure Jay does too, have projects that are working overtime. But a lot of times they're not. I mean, we've got some more of the interim side. They're really conscious of how much they're spending, and so they're not necessarily wanting to spend the extra dollars for overtime. That's one of the benefits of working on a contract or project is, hey, generally every hour you work, you get paid for. So there's some benefits there as well. So. And then less politics. I mean, I think that kind of speaks for itself, right? The bureaucracy. When you're in a permanent position, Sometimes you're having to play some games. There's the bureaucracy and the drama that takes place. I've talked with candidates that said, "Hey, I love this kind of work because I kind of go in, I do my job, and I can kind of leave it much easier, leave it at the office, so to speak." And then of course there's the possibility of converting to permanent. That's I think we had. We were seeing a high percentage of these during 2020 and 2021. I think that's one of the interesting things about the pandemic is I think there was a lot more permanent hiring than there was on the interim and contract side. At least that's what we kind of saw. And so consequently, there was a lot of conversions. We actually had I think 6 conversions in just 1 week not too long ago, which is high. Normally it's 1 or 2 a week. And those are not necessarily contract to hire. Those are, as I said earlier, just interim contract assignments that it was a good match. And so it worked. So I think that's another great benefit to it. Jay, anything you want to add to that?
The only other thing I would add to this is depending on what kind of project you're put on, especially if there's other individuals from a contract basis out there, it can also help with networking down the line. As you meet more and more people, not only at the client, but also other interim or project professionals, you start to build that network. And depending on what the project is, if it's a stressful project, you might get, closer and confide and, oh my gosh, this is gosh, we're working nights, or maybe we aren't, but you tend to keep in contact with those individuals going forward. And a lot of times I have found that they may actually be the source of your next project, as they are pulled onto one thing, maybe a new client, and the client says, "Hey, do you know of anybody else that can do that?" Well, they think back to 2 years ago when you worked with them and you delivered a great work product.
Great point. Great point. All right, let's move on. Jay, you want to talk a little bit about locating and pricing project and interim work?
Sure. So, when you're going out there and you say, you know what, I need to find something for either temporary basis, or I've decided to become a career consultant, whatnot. How do you find those? Well, I just hit on it 30 seconds ago. Networking is probably the number one way, in my opinion, that this happens. And that is not only networking with your buddies who actually have a seat at the table at these companies. It can be with the firms, the Thomas Edwards Group, the Harrison Dickies, the Jefferson Wells. It can be, with other consultants as well, or other interim staff. Obviously, FEI is a fantastic place, and FANG. There's a lot of individuals in these organizations that deal with this. The other one I would say is online and internet postings, and Ben may share a different insight into this. I would say be careful with these, just because I think there's a lot of valid stuff out there, but my recommendation would be, if you see the need for something that is listed online, a lot of times you can get into that organization through networking or somebody because otherwise you're one resume in a pile of 200. And so if you reach out to somebody that's in the business, they may not be able to guarantee you the job, but they may be able to move you into the top 5, top 10, or at least to the top of the pile of those resumes. The project consulting firms, like we've talked about, we all have opportunities, whether on a long-term or short-term, or contract to perm type basis. But reach out to the project consulting firms, reach out to any number of the search firms. A lot of the search firms, especially the what I would call the retained, they may not do a lot of the contract work, but a lot of the firms that do the contract work have search business. So if you do have a perm recruiter that you deal with, most of the times, or a lot of the times, they will have a contract side of the business. And I know Ben touched on this earlier, but it is so true that the roles dictate the pay. And the one conversation I always have with consultants when they come in, I said, listen, what is your, what are you looking to make? And they say, well, I really don't want to give you that number because, I'd be willing to do this. And I say, the reason I want to know that number is I don't want to insult you by bringing something that is, below you, but tell me what you're comfortable with. And one day I may come and say, hey, I've got a senior accountant that's paying $65 an hour. And the next day I might say I have an assistant controller that's paying $80 an hour. It just depends. And we aren't trying to lowball you. Okay. But we have to go based on what the market can pay. And the thing that I see more often than not is somebody that walks into my office and says, I'm a controller, I've done XYZ, and I want $175 to $200 an hour. Okay. Okay, well, good. But that takes us to the win-win pricing, right? It's got to make sense on all parts. We want to be advocates for you as a consultant, as a project professional, but at the same time, we want to make sure that the client is getting the proper level of service for the amount that they are paying. So don't get insulted and think that we're coming at you with something that you aren't worth, but we really do try to get you to work, but we have to do it based on the roles that we are presenting you for. What else? What am I missing there, Ben?
No, I think you nailed it. I think the way one of the things you mentioned about the online and internet postings, I'd say use it as a source of where there are some opportunities, and then use your network to try to get in there, or maybe it's through firms. I mean, I would, if you've got good relationships with the firms and the agencies that you've worked with, is just point blank ask them, hey, do you do any business with XYZ company? And I mean, I know for a fact, if that's a firm that we've got a good relationship with, I will tell you that. If it's a firm that we don't, I would tell you that too, So I would say, hey, there are probably other firms, because companies work with multiple firms and sometimes they give exclusives. And so I think I'd use it as a source of opportunity. And then the win-win pricing is being yeah, you can be as busy as you want to be if you're versatile in terms of your skill set, and you're willing to be flexible in terms of where you'll go for an opportunity, location wise, do you travel or all those kinds of things, and flexible in terms of what you're willing to make. Because I mean, most all of these attendees they've been buyers of our services before. They know they're typically the ones dictating the budget. So that's what we're trying to work within, is what's the budget that our client's given us, and then can we find the talent that fits that. I think those are the only things I would add. I did. Cliff, any questions thus far? Or anybody seeing any questions?
Looks like we may have gotten one on chat. Let me check real quick.
Yeah, let me make, and if it's not related to this, we can certainly cover it at the end. But
yeah, how accurate is the belief that when it comes to bring, let's see, how accurate is the belief that when it comes to bring an internal or an external resource, always has to come from the top? Sorry, I didn't read that too well.
Okay.
So how accurate is the belief that when they need to bring an external resource in, that it has to come from the top?
An external resource that has to come from, as far as the buyer being at the top of the organization?
No, I have a feeling, Ben, this may be in reference, and maybe that individual can confirm this or not, but it may be that based on what I said, at least we might be able to get your resume to the top of the pile.
Oh,
so I think my only point there is if there's 200 resumes sitting on somebody's desk and they have a need for one individual, chances are they are going to find the people that they want to talk to within the first 10 or 15. If your resume is number 175 down here, the chances of maybe even getting it looked at may not necessarily be true. Now, of course, analytics now has changed that, where we're doing keyword searches and all that stuff. But I think that was just a general rule of thumb, that if you can reach out to somebody like Ben and say, hey, Ben, do you know somebody at XYZ company? And Ben can say, sure, I can give them a call, or I can do something like that. You are much better off versus being in that pile of hundreds of resumes.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And when it comes to interim work. I mean, I know what one of the things we employ is, we've got kind of an available list. We're reaching out to, anywhere from 300 to 500 people on a, probably every 2 to 3 weeks, just to make sure we're staying in touch with folks that have a reasonable chance of being available. They've either worked for us before, but they're on another project. They've notified us that their project might be ending, or they're in the market. And that's honestly, that's the first place we kind of turn when we have an opportunity that comes up. We look at the folks that we have that we're reasonably sure are available. So that's going into those working with firms.
I do have a clarification on the question. He is referring to the decision maker standpoint. So in other words, if it comes from the top, that maybe the CFO or COO has to make that decision to bring resources in.
Oh, I guess that varies. I mean, certainly at some point they're probably signing off on it, but I mean, as far as bringing folks in, I mean, a lot of times we're working, it just depends on the level of the role that we're interacting with all levels of generally management. It could be the CFO, could be the controller, could be a VP, FP&A, finance. It's not necessarily always coming from the top, but certainly the top is signed off on it.
Yeah, sometimes you'll see I guess the project manager or director, and maybe not immediately, but getting approval level to do some of that. Now we have a question from John. Is there a preference in billing options from clients? For instance, weekly versus monthly?
A preference from clients. That's interesting. That's a good question. I mean, we bill weekly. We bill and pay weekly. And that's our preference, and we try to ensure our clients accept those terms.
But this question could also go for if they're working directly, right?
Right, if they're working directly. I know some that will do bi-monthly, or is that semi-monthly rather? Semi-monthly and monthly. I do know some that will that prefer that, clients that prefer that type of arrangement.
I can tell you from our situation, we do all of it. I mean, we do weekly. We actually try to steer clear of weekly. Just it's a lot of, for us, it's a lot of paperwork. It's a lot of admin. So we typically do semi-monthly, but we also do monthly. And I also have some clients that are quarterly.
Yeah.
And along those lines, the follow-up question is, are consultants paid W-2 or 1099?
Yeah, we'll kind of cover that later. So that's a good question. I'll make sure we cover that.
Okay.
All right. Let's see here. Oh, polling question. So the primary way I found project consultants, there we go. Interim professionals or perform project consulting interim professional work has been through my network, consulting from our agency, sandwich board on the street corner. I've never hired project consultants or done that type of work. Am I dating myself by using the term sandwich board? Does anybody really know what I probably am.
Yeah, but I'm dying to see if somebody answers it that way, because then I have a new marketing strategy.
We can't all be as dope as Cliff Edwards. He's
a proven fact.
Yeah, I'm surprised you're not gonna get one even asking for one, Jay.
Oh man,
how about that?
Yeah,
pretty much network, which is kind of what we thought, and the firm. So I do think, and I would argue that a firm and agency is really just an extension of your network. I've always kind of felt like that is that ought to be part of your network as well. So let's see here. Let's keep going here. Companies. Jay, you're probably real close to all of these things. What are the hot projects and stuff that people are looking for?
Sure. So, I think the pandemic has done a number on this slide. what I'm seeing right now is there tends to be a lot of unfinished projects. As we went into the pandemic, a lot of things were kind of put on hold because there was still a lot of uncertainty. And then, of course, we entered into the elections, which also adds a little bit of uncertainty. Every 4 years, we sometimes, well, we always see this little lull until we hit November and things start getting back into normal just in time for the holidays. So what I'm seeing in terms of hot projects, I'm seeing unfinished projects from the last 18 months. I'm seeing ERP upgrades. I am seeing cleanup. I'm also seeing a lot of money that is on the table right now that is prime for acquisition. So my clients that are in the private equity space are spending a lot. They are doing a lot of acquisitions. And so through that, I'm seeing due diligence projects, and I'm also seeing post-merger integration projects where they go through, right? And we're buying up 2, 3, 4, and how do we piece them together so that we are all moving towards the same goal? In terms of technical expertise, and in technical expertise in this way, I'm going to talk about just kind of the stuff I'm seeing from a GAAP or accounting technical aspect. If, believe it or not, Rev Rec and lease accounting are still hot. I mean, they just are. There's still a lot of projects that are going on there, but I would say the biggest thing that we are experiencing, or that I'm seeing just in the marketplace in general, is the influx of the use of SPACs right now. And so I'm probably dealing with 7 to 9 SPACs right now, and getting them to market and getting them ready for market. So from that IPO readiness framework, I'm trying to think what else I'm seeing. From an industry standpoint, I'm still seeing a lot of financial institutions. I'm still seeing a lot of healthcare. We recently, here in the last 5 to 8 years, you've seen a consolidation in a lot of the healthcare due to service providers trying to evade some of the Stark laws. So you're seeing the merger of a lot of the healthcare practices. And so healthcare alone adds a little bit of complexity in terms of revenue recognition. So that's still one that I see a lot. And then I think from a software standpoint, we're seeing a lot of now, and this may just be because this is something that's near and dear to my heart, but I'm seeing a lot of requests right now for tools such as Power BI and Tableau, ACL, stuff like that, as people are undertaking some of the data analytics frameworks. In addition, we're seeing an influx of robotic process automation. And so being able to use any of the RPA tools out there. And then, of course, we always have the ERP systems that are always in high demand if you're a great functional user of SAP, et cetera. So, I think that it's really all over the board, but this could be completely different 3 months from now, 6 months from now. Ben,
Yeah.
what are you seeing?
Yeah, the only you covered it. A couple of things I would add is from a software standpoint, hearing a lot about NetSuite and a lot of Workday. And a lot of Intact, which is kind of interesting. And so, I mean, it's just funny how these things seem to come in waves. From an industry standpoint, I would add construction, anything building product related, or manufacturing, whether it's building products manufacturing or consumer goods, household goods, those kinds of things, food manufacturing. It just seems like that whole manufacturing sector is really taken off. Some family office and some not-for-profits. So, yeah. Let's see. So, let's talk a little bit about working with project consulting and interim firms. So, we kind of touched a little bit on this. Is really having relationships with firms, I think, is really helpful. And so, getting to know them. Find someone that has, maybe there's different specializations, there's different benefit packages. Some companies do more travel than others. I mean, for instance, most of our projects are here local in North Texas. Others might be doing more national work or even international work. So it just kind of depends on your flavor, but finding a match that kind of meets your background and your needs, I think, is really important. And then let's talk a little bit about commitment, because I think that's really probably something that's that Jay and I are probably both really sensitive about is commitment. And we recognize that folks are in a permanent job search, and not all projects require long-term commitments. Projects could go really long-term, and some of them definitely have specific commitments. I mean, for instance, when we're working a medical leave or maternity leave, we're looking for a commitment for a duration, because oftentimes a client is going to make an investment in a kind of a transition period, sometimes 1 or 2 months, and then maybe 3 months in that role, and then another month in transition. And so that commitment is critical. And if somebody can't commit to that, that's okay. Just say you can't commit to it, and we can, if you're the right fit and the client's okay with the risk, then great. But oftentimes, they're not, and that might just mean waiting for the next opportunity. A lot of our projects, a lot of our interim and project type of work that we're doing, a 2-week notice is all that we require. And so, which is just, I think, minimal professional courtesy. So I think that's really critical, I think, is meeting those commitments. And because I tell you, Dallas is Dallas and Fort Worth, I mean, they're big cities, but small towns, and the accounting and finance world especially makes it really small. So your reputation is on the line here. Both ours are as well. And then communication, I think that's critical, is maintaining ongoing communication. If you're on a project, I mean, you're the eyes and the ears of the organization, and can really help us do our job, help us to make your jobs easier if you're on a project. And so we're checking in regularly. I had a candidate, I mean, it can also be to your benefit. I had a candidate that was working on a project, not through us. It was with a company that they had continued to kind of extend, and all of a sudden, then he had met his commitment. So he was meeting his commitment, got a permanent offer for something that he accepted, and then went to give a 2-week notice in addition to what he'd already kind of fulfilled the initial commitments, and found out that the client was interested in him, and sorry that he had already accepted, and he felt like he had to meet the commitment. I mean, he had made the commitment to accept, so he didn't want to go back on that. I felt like, hey, if he would have been communicating with, maybe if through the agency, letting them know that, hey, I'm getting close to an offer, hey, I'm just going on a second interview, something like that, he might have had an opportunity to have some leverage as well. He might have gotten 2 offers out of this deal. So communication can also be the benefit to not just the firm you're working with, or the client, but also yourself. And so then W-2 versus 1099. So we had a question about that, and I've seen it both ways. Different firms do different things. At Thomas Edwards Group, if you're working for us, you're a W-2 employee. So you would be working as a W-2 employee, and you would qualify for benefits and that sort of thing in that arrangement. And so those can also vary, but I've seen it both ways with firms doing the 1099 arrangement. Sometimes you can get a little bit higher rate when you're doing 1099. Just kind of depends. Jay, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, you hit the nail on the head with commitment. We really do try to make sure that we fulfill our responsibilities and be as upfront and honest with the client, but that does rely on constant communication. The one thing that I hate it when it happens, and it doesn't happen often, but I get a call from the client that says, by the way, did you know so-and-so accepted a job this morning? Nope. Yeah. Nope. So I think one thing just to note, when you're working with any of the firms out there, is make sure that if you're going to be out, or if you're if something is going to happen that is out of the norm, make sure that firm knows about it, because the last thing I want to do is call up my client and say, hey, I'm just checking in on so and so. How is so and so doing? Who's been out for the last 3 days? Okay. Yeah, that's awkward. I can tell you from a pay point, we are much like Thomas Edwards Group. Everybody is a W-2 employee. If you do decide to come in our firm under a 1099 situation, there are certain hurdles that you need to overcome and show proof of certain liability insurance, whatnot. So although you may be able to get a little bit more pay on the 1099 way, it sometimes requires a little more insurance coverage that may not necessarily be worth the increase in pay.
Great. All right. Well, let's kind of talk a little bit about putting yourself in the best position for opportunities. I mentioned that sometimes working in contract can working in contract positions and projects can have an impact on your resume. I think your resume, it's just, I think there's been some presentations on this before. Jim Ashworth does a fantastic job in talking about resumes. I mean, I think it needs to be consistent with your LinkedIn, trying to create kind of a compelling reason for a client to want to schedule an interview, right? And I kind of refer to the resume like a movie, and the first 3 inches is your trailer. And I think, again, Jim does a great job of kind of helping people build out that trailer. And I think it's really important to hit the high points of why you're a compelling candidate for any role. And then just focusing, making sure you've got some real key accomplishments on there, right? I mean, that's what people are looking for: success, and they're looking to accomplish certain solve problems. So, dollars and percentages, and our eyes are drawn to numbers. Maybe it's because we're accountants, but I mean, it's just drawn to numbers. So being able to show some of those things, real savings, real time savings, those kinds of things. And the interviewing skills. Again, I don't know if anyone's ever listened to Jay Fusaro does a really good presentation on interviewing skills, and kind of, I think he calls it as playbook, kind of developing a playbook. But it's really a good idea too. And I think so kind of having a story around each of the bullets in your resume is important there. But I think when you're interviewing, energy. I think a lot of people always ask about, well, are we seeing age discrimination and other things out there? I think there's energy discrimination. I think really what people are looking for is somebody that can come in, roll up their sleeves, dig in the details, do the job, and have the energy to do it. And I think that's the thing. I know we've put a lot of people to work that people would have thought maybe they might have been discriminated by age, but man, they're working long hours and they're doing a great job. So I think from an interviewing skills, I think energy is critical, and then having the stories around your examples, your bullets in your resume. And then being, versatility and expertise. I think that in putting yourself in the best position for opportunities in project and consulting and interim is having that versatility, being able to, the multiple systems, having that system savvy and having that expertise, I think is important, because certainly there are clients that are looking for specific expertise in different areas. And so to the extent you have that, I think it's going to put you in a good position for those projects. Professionalism. I think, polish is certainly important. That's communication. It's being positive, right? People want to work with people that are positive, likable, get along with others, helpful. Kind of goes without saying. Sometimes I talk about the kindergarten qualities. They play well with others. They share. They're just positive to be around. So I think those are some of the things that are really important when it comes to professionalism. And your reputation. I mentioned Dallas, Fort Worth being, big cities, but small towns. I think ensuring that you're protecting that reputation by honoring your commitments, by communicating well with people. I think those are some of the things that when I think about reputation is doing that, because you're using your network, right? If you're trying to find opportunities through your network, then I talk to people every day that have kind of, it's easy to do a backdoor reference, right? I mean, what is it? The 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Well, LinkedIn's only 3 degrees. So, I mean, I think everybody in the accounting and finance world is only really 2 degrees of separation from everybody. You're either a first connection, second connection, or a third connection. So, I think it's reputation is critical. So protecting that is really important. And then I kind of threw this in because I think it's part of the world these days, right? These video conferences, Zoom, Teams, and the whole idea of work from home capabilities. I think that puts you in a good position for opportunities, because again, it makes you more versatile. Some opportunities might be going into the office, but some might need to be working from home at times. So having a good work from home setup, good solid internet connection, camera, the phone, supplies, all those kinds of things, printer if you need it, and then as far as just video conferencing, I think kind of being prepared and dressing the part, removing distractions, test run, and being familiar with all the different tools. I mean, I just used Blue Jeans for the first time. I'd never used that software, so that was a new one for me. But whether it's Teams or Zoom or Blue Jeans, taking the time to familiarize yourself with it, download it, be ready for it. Don't wait 5 minutes before you're supposed to jump on and then try to figure out, oh, I got to download this. And so I think, again, just some of the preparation. I always talk about controlling what you can control, right? And these are certainly some of the things that we can control are, putting together a good resume and making sure our interviewing skills are top notch, and being nice to work with, and protecting that reputation, and just all the technology stuff too. So
yeah, Ben, can I add
yeah,
just a couple
please.
points to this? So the only I mean, this is all great information. One thing I would add on a resume. So, and this is just our practice. We tend to take your resume. We will not change anything on your resume, but we tend not to put addresses or anything on the resume because, and a lot of people come back and say, well, why did you do that? Well, at the end of the day, if I submit a resume and it shows that you are living in Frisco and this position is in downtown Dallas, if you are willing to make that drive from Frisco to downtown Dallas, that is your decision. And it is not the client's decision to say, you know what? This person lives in Frisco. They would never want to drive here, and throw that out. Okay. So a lot of times we will do that. And the other thing, and I just want to touch base on it, you already hit it, but reputation. There is a lot of stuff that is out of our control when we're in the people business, and when dealing with people, there's stuff that happens, or when a client immediately shuts down a project, to end this week, and all of a sudden somebody's upset, and now all of a sudden that consultant calls me and says, how could you do this to me, and starts calling me every name in the book. That does not do great in managing your reputation. And I think it's important to note that, and like Ben has already said, very, very big cities here, but very small town feel. And so if I have somebody that I know Ben has worked with, or Kelly Harris or Helen Dickey have worked with, I will give them a call and say, hey, did you have a good experience? And is this somebody that I want representing my firm? So do not underestimate the aspect of what that reputation risk is in the small town that is Dallas-Fort Worth.
Right. No, thanks for elaborating on that. That is all true. All right, let's jump to a polling question. So for the next 6 to 9 months, I expect the Dallas-Fort Worth employment market in accounting and finance to be about the same, worse than it is now, better than it is now. I don't care because I made a killing on Doge. Everybody's wondering, what's this guy's deal with Doge? But somebody has.
At least for today.
That's great. Yeah, but that's interesting. So almost predominantly, a lot of people are very very bullish on the year coming up here. So that's great. So let's go into the general market update. Jay, you want to go
Sure,
first?
sure. I'll kick this off. So 2020 review. 2020 was tough. There's no doubt about it. The pandemic hit things. In my opinion, people hunkered down. Okay. I didn't see a whole lot of big new projects coming in. I saw people just kind of waiting, or maybe if they had somebody that was doing contract work for them, a lot of times what I was seeing is quarterly extensions. Okay. Yeah. Listen, we really can't rock the boat right now. People are working remotely. We got it under control, but we still need to keep this person out there. I didn't get a whole lot of people coming to me and saying, hey, I've got a couple $1 million to use in implementation. Everybody was kind of waiting out not only the pandemic, but also the election results. So 2020 was definitely a different year. I think Ben touched on this earlier, that perm was still in high demand. We saw a lot of demand for perm. And as I go into 2021, I am still seeing a lot of perm. Now, I will tell you that the first part of this year has been astronomical in terms of in terms of the contract work. However, I think what folks don't seem to know is, at least what we are experiencing, is there is a shortage of good talent. And so we are having a hard time finding really good talent. So part of that is also helping to educate our clients when they come and say, okay, I need somebody that has been a CPA for 15 years, has public accounting experience, and has used NetSuite in the casino industry. Well, I always refer them to Ben, because that's Ben's background. But I think part of it is educating those clients, saying, well, listen, there was a day and time when you could actually say that that's what you wanted, and I could get that for you. Oh, and by the way, they also have to be fluent in Mandarin. Yeah, that's tough right now. So I think we're still seeing the war on talent right now, but I think that might change here in the upcoming months or weeks, especially as you start seeing maybe some of those stimulus initiatives being put to rest. So I would say that the next 6 to 9 months are going to be extremely strong, and people, I think, are still trying to do more with less. And so I think the name of the game now is a lot around process improvement, process efficiencies, and getting those undone projects done that had been waylaid as of the pandemic last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Jay, I'll note too that at least just voicing my opinion, but everything you read has a different opinion. You can read an article that says inflation is here to stay and we're going to have stagflation, and then the next article says that the country's going to be booming for 2, 3, 4+ years, which I'm kind of in that camp. And then you look at all the companies and people are moving here, and there is no doubt that Texas is hot right now. My advice is don't get too caught up in trying to read, find articles that either fit a grim outlook or a really optimistic outlook. Just work the search. Hit your network, stay in touch. And so if you've got 20 or 30 people or 80 people in your network, don't just talk to them once. Stay in touch with them, and that's where a lot of your opportunities will come from. Same with the recruiters. Stay in touch with those folks. One conversation, they may forget you 60, 90 days later. Stay in touch, be positive. The people that spend time and effort on their job search and spend it in the right places are the ones that get the jobs. It's very much an inefficient, fragmented market, really, finding a job. So forget about the noise out there and what you saw on the news at night, and you spend your search for contract or perm. If you spend it in the right places in the right amount of time, you will get more results than other folks out there.
Well said.
Yeah, very well said. I think the only thing I would add is 2020 was a roller coaster. I mean, we lost probably a third of our contractors that were working at the time of when the pandemic hit, and probably 2/3 of our jobs, our searches just kind of stopped. And kind of it was our weekly number of new searches were kind of falling until around the 1st of May, and then they started climbing back up. predominantly permanent searches. And then around Labor Day is probably about the time when we started seeing the contract side of things picking back up. And then we finished the year with really close to probably the number of searches that we had pre-pandemic. And then 2021 so far has been crazy. I mean, it is high demand. We've got well over 100 searches going right now, which is more than pre-pandemic levels. And surprisingly, close to half of those are six-figure jobs. So there's opportunities out there. And I think the next 6 to 9 months, what I'm really optimistic about is I think clients are going to have to be a little bit more flexible and maybe not being able to get 10 out of 10 requirements, and that might provide others that are looking for opportunities that might just lack a skill or two to be able to get that opportunity, and contract may be the way to get it, or working on a project. So I'm really optimistic.
Yeah, there seemed to be a window where there were some Louisiana and Oklahoma candidates, maybe Houston, but now the price of oil has rebounded, and all those companies are coming back as well.
Right. Well, I think we're getting right at the time here. Let's get our last polling question here, so we can let those people that need to get off, but then we'll have time for questions. So last polling question: my favorite part of FANG meeting is Bob Walker's stories, Cliff Edwards' jokes, both A and B. Who are Bob Walker and Cliff Edwards? Look at that. Look at that. There's a few people that don't know you, Cliff.
A fitting ending.
Or maybe it's Bob. Now everybody knows Bob. All right. Well, hopefully that allows everyone to get their CPE credit. But if we do have time for questions. So I don't know if we were able to get to all those questions, but I'm happy to stay on as long as there are questions.
This is Bob. I'd like to jump in if I may.
Sure, Bob.
I want to thank all of you who have attended. I have a little bit of statistics, however, and the statistics are as follows. We had 37 attendees, and we have 18 of the attendees who are not availing themselves of the FEI services. I don't have the resumes, I don't have their synopsis, and they're not receiving information from the Google groups as a result. Let me give you some other statistics. We've had 18 job offers in a year that have come so far this month on the Google groups, and we have 8 that have come through the synopsis. If you're not in a position where you are not getting the Google groups opportunities and you're not signed up for the synopsis, I guess my point simply is you're not really looking for a job. So those of you who are not, I mean, I could name you off here if you want me to, but those of you who are not, please just send me an email saying, send me the joining stuff, and I will send you the information on how to do the synopsis, how to get on the Google groups, and how you can get more connected here.
Yeah, Bob, I would strongly encourage everybody in transition or thinking about transition, do that. It's really just a short synopsis of your resume. And I think between Jim Ashworth and Bob, they kind of did a poll and did some surveying. It's something like 30 to 40+% of the six-figure finance and accounting jobs in North Texas come from either Bob Walker referring, a company or a recruiter lead, or on his list, the ones that he gets out as well. And so that synopsis will get you on that one, those ones that maybe a recruiter doesn't want it sent to everybody, or a company may not want it sent to everybody. But once you're on that list, also, you're getting job leads probably every night for the local job market. It is a huge piece of the traffic out there in finance and accounting job search in North Texas.
Yeah, You know, and one of the things too, I think, you know, I've heard Bob talk about it, but I think, you know, what we oftentimes see for in our space of accounting and finance, a lot of candidates that are in transition, once they land, they kind of stop networking. And I think it's just really key and important part of the process is finding the organization, FEI, FANG. I mean, but being a regular participant, because that'll at least allow you to find something that's keeping you engaged and in the process of meeting and helping others, right? I mean, I think it's just part of the process, and it needs to be a practice.
Hey,
The
Bob, it
average,
looks,
the average tenure of a CFO in the United States is now under 2 years. Unless
Wow.
you are in a position where you're about ready to retire, you're probably going to be looking for another opportunity sometime again in your career. And that's not because you're not good at what you do. In fact, 9 out of 10 times I find it's because you are quite good at what you do. I find that it's quite often the fact that you put the company in a position where they're available for sale or they're available for something else because of your hard work and what you've done right. So you basically work yourself out of a job. That happens all the time. So the fact that there are many people who are in a position where they're looking for a job every 2 years is not necessarily because their skill set isn't good. It's possibly it's because their skill set is excellent and too good. So my point simply is this: you know, it's the ABL. It's always be looking. It's always be aware. Always be looking, or you can say always be networking. However you want to say that. But the concept basically is to keep in touch. And the worst thing that happens to you if you keep in touch is you don't need it, but somebody else does. And you're able to help somebody else. And that's a pretty good feeling.
That's a great point, Bob. We have a question from Richard for Bob. If you are a part of the synopsis, so in other words, you send your synopsis in, are you automatically part of the Google group?
Yes. Well, pardon me. You have to have the synopsis and the resume, and then I invite you to join the Google group. Yes.
And the thing is, if you don't that night or within a day or two start getting some job leads, then you know for some reason you're not on there yet, and you just pop Bob a quick email.
Well, some people think that the nightly newsletter from Matt is membership, and we don't participate in the national. We have enough stuff going on in Dallas, Texas, that we don't send our leads to them. Most of the stuff that is pertinent to our area has nothing to do with the nightly newsletter that comes out from Matt Budd. So,
and that's a huge distinction. You know, Bob gets you North Texas, the national one gets you national, and you know you may want to do some project or consulting work on more of a national basis also, especially with remote capabilities and maybe getting on a plane every other week or that type of thing. So I think it's probably a good idea to get both. One question for Jay and Ben. What's the most common complaint from contractors working under the models that you guys talked about?
Wow, that's a good question. The most common complaint.
I can kick it off.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think it's, I would say that Ben alluded to it earlier, but, you know, sometimes it is a roller coaster and sometimes there is downtime. So if you are working on short engagements, there might be time in between engagements. The other common complaint that I get, and it most commonly comes from individuals that are new in the consulting space or in the interim workspace, is that they get into an organization and they may not necessarily feel like they have a home. So, right, they don't feel necessarily that they're part of the team and that people treat them differently because they're an external resource or an outside contractor. And sometimes you have to sit down and say, well, at the end of the day, that's what you are. And sometimes that happens at the organization. They know that you are in there to get the job done. So don't think that you're going to, you know, overnight become best friends with the rest of the team, because chances are they've had other people in there before helping them get some work done. And they also know that you're going to be gone in 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 3 months, whatever.
I think maybe the only thing I I would probably add, as I think about complaints for people that are working. I mean, you know, I guess although you do qualify for benefits and accrue some vacation, it's probably not as lucrative a package as you might get in a more permanent job. I mean, the idea is, hey, this is a finite time, and they need you when they need you. You probably don't have the luxury of taking a lot of time off. That's why you're in place. That's a good question. Kind of made me think.
Yeah, one of the additional positives is you don't really have, you know, you don't really want to get involved in any of the office politics or that type of thing. You just get to do, you know, get to work your craft. And if it ever gets super difficult or you feel like it's not the right place for you, you can give notice and eventually go on to something else.
And I think that's a great point, Cliff. Anytime I have somebody that's out working on a project and they say, oh my gosh, this place is a mess. So you know what? There's always a light at the end of the tunnel. There always is a light.
Absolutely.
One of the advantages I've seen, quite frankly, is that it's a strange anomaly, but the company listens to you. They listen to you if they're paying you by the hour. They listen to you if they've hired somebody that they want ideas from. It's funny, you know. You can be an employee with the greatest ideas in the whole wide world. You come in with a great idea, and there's, you know, it's kind of, well, you know, you were hired to go do this. Don't give us ideas, you know. And they seem to listen to the consultants because they're paying them by the hour to be a consultant.
When you walk away, a lot of times with an extra bullet point or two, you know, as Ben said, on your resume, and that could be what gets you that next interview, or it may be something that you spend the next couple of years doing.
Mm-hmm. Right. Any other questions?
There is a question that says, do you cover the Georgetown area in Leeds? And the answer is, well, we just did, but not frequently.
Okay. Any other? I'm happy to stay on.
Well, and you guys might want to give your email addresses. I had a question about from one of the participants about his background and whether it fits some of the things that we're seeing. And I encourage him to maybe have a side conversation, maybe in the next couple of days or something.
Would it be okay if we just put that in the chat?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think I can stop sharing probably and just do that. Let's see here. Yep, I can do that.
While we have this pause, I'm going to put in my plug for the FEI. Those of you who are not members of the FEI should consider that, I think, very strongly as another networking opportunity to be able to enhance your career opportunities in the future. As you know, I'm the chair of what I call the career management. And management of career doesn't necessarily mean you're looking for a job. It just means that the skill sets that you're going to learn through the FEI and the contacts of the FEI may very well be in a position where you maintain a position rather than have to find a new one. So my point to you simply is, it is one of the largest financial executive chapters in the world. It is very, very, there's a lot of activities for all kinds of people all across the board. I think the dues have just been reduced a little bit. So, you know, I encourage you all, if you are not FEI members, to certainly look into that. And any of these folks that are on the call here, myself or John Casey, anybody can help you do that if you need to.
All right. Well, hey, thanks again, Jay. Thank you. I couldn't have done this without you. So really appreciate that. And Cliff, Bob, Nancy, appreciate your help and appreciate everybody's participation and attendance.
Hey, one quick thing. It looks like you guys posted the email addresses to just the panelists.
Oh.
So it's ben@thomasedwards.com.
Oh.
And it's j.smith@jeffersonwells.com.
Here we go. I'll send it again.
And if you want to send the stuff to me, it's rbobwalker@gmail.com. Real easy.
While
There we
they're
go.
picking that up, I want to let everyone know that if you're earning CPE credits today, it should be 7 to 10 business days before the credits are released. Please be patient. FEI National has been hosting many webinars, and they are behind on their CPE management. So we do apologize for the delay, but the CPEs will eventually be there. Feel free to email me at nancy.ellers@feidallas.org if you have any CPE questions.
Great. Thank you all for
Great.
coming. And thank you to Jay and Ben.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thank
Thanks.
you. This
Bye.
does
Bye-bye.
end the webinar. Have a great evening.